My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network shows and retrospectively review them. Not too long ago, I broke my no mobile or flash games rule to review Steven Universe Attack the Light, which was exclusive to mobile platforms. I'd initially dismissed basically all of Cartoon Network's mobile games as merely an extension of the flash games they'd make for their website. However, what I found with Attack the Light was a charming Paper Mario inspired RPG that was pretty damn good. Attack the Light must have done pretty well, because Cartoon Network not only brought back the same developers to make a sequel, but they made this sequel for consoles. Steven Universe Save the Light came to PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC, completely ignoring mobile altogether. It also had a billion different release dates. It came to PS4 first on October 31, 2017, before releasing on Xbox One soon after on November 3. Then, in 2018, the PC and Mac versions were made available on August 13. To round everything out, a Switch version was released almost exactly 1 year later on October 30. As I mentioned, this is a full-fledged sequel to Attack the Light, and it's developed by Grumpy Face, the studio who made the first game and would develop the third game in the trilogy, Unleash the Light. This is the kind of developer continuity I was talking about in my Ben 10 review. But then again, Attack the Light was better than pretty much every Ben 10 game ever made, so maybe Cartoon Network felt more confident to give them the keys again. Save the Light is a very interesting case to look at from a critical reception standpoint. If you just look at the average score on Metacritic, you won't get the proper context. It sits on just a 54 for the PS4 version. Seems pretty awful, right? Well, if you switch over to the Switch version, you'll find scores of 7.5, 8.1, and 8.8. What's led to such a discrepancy? Reading the reviews reveals that basically every reviewer enjoyed the actual gameplay, but it was an absolute mess from a performance standpoint. I'll touch on this in more depth during my analysis. Save the Light is a great example of why reviews are often only relevant for a short time in the video game industry nowadays. With the addition of patches and major updates, games can do a complete 180 almost in the blink of an eye. I was a massive fan of Attack the Light, so I couldn't be more excited to see what Grumpy Face can do on much more powerful platforms. But before I get into the review, I think you guys know what time it is. It's time to smash that motherfucking subscribe button. There's pretty much only 1 month of games left to review from Cartoon Network before I transition over to Nickelodeon video game history. If you thought Cartoon Network video game history was good, that series is going to be absolutely insane. The only way to make sure you don't miss it is by joining the Cartoon Review crew and subscribing. But now, on with the review. I've mentioned in a few of my recent reviews that a lot of the PS4 era Cartoon Network games haven't felt truly next gen. For the most part, I haven't really seen any examples of why these games couldn't realistically be on the PS3 or even PS2. While it's probably a stretch to say Save the Light couldn't possibly have existed in the past generation, it's the first time I've looked at a Cartoon Network game and thought, yep, this belongs as part of this generation. Save the Light easily feels like the most high-budget Cartoon Network game ever made. It also feels like a proper console game rather than a mobile game that has been brought over to consoles. Grumpy Face could have easily just taken the exact style they used for Attack the Light, plonked it here, and called it a day, but they've made so many additions that make the jump to consoles worth it. The thing you'll probably first notice is that the movement controls have completely changed. In Attack the Light, you explored locations with simple swipes of the screen. It was very basic stuff, but it worked rather well due to the control scheme limitations of a phone. Here though, you've got full 360-degree movement, baby. It really feels like a Paper Mario adventure now. You've also got a lot more party members at your disposal. Alongside Steven and the Crystal Gems, you have the chance to add Connie, Greg, and Peridot to the journey. Weirdly though, Lapis isn't playable, which is probably the one character Save the Light is missing for this time period of the show. However, just like the first game, your party is limited to 4 characters at a time. You're always required to have Steven in the party, so in reality, there's only 3 spots to customize. With so many more characters at your disposal and a new way of exploring environments, Grumpy Face has combined the two to create additional gameplay elements outside of battles. As you run around Beach City and a handful of iconic locations from the show, you'll be able to switch between controlling each member in your party. Not only is this nice from an aesthetic point of view, but there are also benefits to switching who you're controlling. Often you'll come to roadblocks that can only be passed via a specific character's unique ability. For example, Peridot can move around metal blocks and pillars, while Greg can unlock hidden secrets by jamming on his guitar. As you could probably imagine, these abilities also open up secret areas and items. The Ben 10 games included some light elements like this, but Save the Light takes it to the next level. To give you a good idea of how much there is to explore and uncover, after rolling the credits for the first time, the game told me I had completed just 48% of the game. This is in stark contrast to Attack the Light, where I'd pretty much completed everything it had to offer in my initial run. Upgrading weapons through weapon schematics you find is just one of the benefits of this added exploration and puzzle solving. Bismuth's Forge is a prominent location in the game, and here you can take schematics, as long as you've collected all the required items, and make your tools of destruction so much stronger. I think this was a neat idea, but they were maybe a little too hidden. I found 3 or 4 schematics across the whole game, and only actually had the required items to craft 1. Once you've finished the game, it feels like you don't really need upgraded weapons, so I think some reworking of this system is needed. Side quests were sort of part of the first game, but they're much more prevalent here. There are plenty of things to do in Beach City, which aren't exactly the most creative quests ever, but it's fun to interact with characters from the show. Returning from the first game is occasional dialogue options. At points, you'll get the chance to encourage a certain party member, respond to what has just been said, or even give a wacky name to a boss character. Like the first game, you can dish out extra experience points, but it's been expanded on further by causing an increase to the relationship meter between Steven and another character. I'll touch on this relationship mechanic in more detail in a second. However, what you'll notice is that this game feels familiar, but expanded. Attack the Light is the blueprint, but Grumpy Face have clearly poured over every detail of that game, looking for ways to build upon it. This is obvious in no bigger way than the battle system. The core concept of Save the Light's battles won't be unfamiliar to players of the first game, nor players of Paper Mario, which is where the style has been lifted from. Your attacks are still tied to star points, and you're still actively participating in how the moves are pulled off, rather than watching things unfold in traditional turn-based style. But, as I said, everything has been expanded upon. One thing I immediately noticed was that Steven can attack enemies now. Previously, Steven was purely a support character, and while he is still clearly designed in that archetype, he's not completely incapable on offense. It's such a ridiculously minor change, but it shows just how much Grumpy Face cares about Steven Universe. It feels like the character of Steven is growing and developing in the games the same way he was in the show. Steven was more vulnerable in the beginning, but as the show progressed, he became better equipped for combat, which is shown here. Arguably, the biggest change to the battles is that turn-based action has been kicked to the curb in favour of real-time battling. Instead of you and your enemies taking turns and your star meter refilling every time control comes back to you, the star meter refills constantly and allows for constant action. As I mentioned, almost every attack you perform is interactive, generally taking the form of pressing X at the right time to do a perfect attack and deal extra damage. In Attack the Light, this was only for making your attacks stronger, but here this mechanic has been tied into the star meter. You can still deal out extra damage, but if you time your attack to absolute perfection, your star meter refills quicker. The same thing goes for when you're defending characters from attacks. This is honestly a brilliant addition. It ensures that you almost never have those moments where you're sitting around bored, waiting for your stars to come back. You're always actively participating, and the wait for more stars is lightning quick when you time a couple of attacks well and get in a great block. The timing also ties into the relationship meter that I mentioned. Each character has a relationship meter with all of the other characters. This can be filled through the dialogue option stuff, but also by actions in battle. If you pull off a critical block or help defeat an enemy that's been targeting a specific party member, you'll get a chance to give a shout out during battle. On the surface, it's a fun little addition that feels perfectly at home in a Steven Universe game. This kind of thing is what Steven Universe is all about, but the fun really starts once that meter is filled. When you max it out, you unlock special attacks and abilities that are far more useful than the regular stuff at your disposal. An absolute buttload of move options are unveiled because of this. For example, this is how fusion is achieved now, which makes so much more sense than the way it worked in Attack the Light. It's genuinely impressive that Grumpy Face have made every relationship feel unique. And all of the attacks opened up by this feel like the perfect combination of the two characters' personalities. I'll say it again, but the people working on this just understand the show in a way that few developers working on Cartoon Network games ever have. Another major change to the battle system is that characters can be placed literally anywhere on the battlefield. Sure, there are still times where your team is all on the left and the enemy team is all on the right, but more often than not, it's a bit of a mishmash. Then, on top of that, the position of enemy characters on the battlefield will change over time. Enemies run around to perform attacks, and your offensive efforts can knock them around. A massive layer of depth is added through this. The character layout when you start a battle forces you to drastically change your tactics, as depending on where characters are, it will render some attacks useless, while some attacks will be perfect. You've also got new ways to defeat enemies. Locked into battle on a cliffside? Well, deliver a strong uppercut while an enemy is standing precariously close, and you can knock them into the abyss. Similarly, opponents can take advantage of this as well, but thankfully your characters just take damage rather than dying instantly. Because enemies move around the battlefield quite freely, timing plays a big part here. For example, it often pays off to be patient and wait for the right time to strike. Waiting just an extra second or two could mean the difference between nailing 2 enemies with Pearl's spear attack or nailing the whole team. This is genuinely one of the deepest RPG combat systems I have experienced firsthand. That's not something I thought I'd ever say while playing a Cartoon Network game. The only way this could have been absolutely perfect is if they gave you some way to strategically move your own party members around during battles. I don't necessarily want free control like a modern Final Fantasy, but some restricted control that you have to spend star points on would be great. There's also a number of quality of life improvements. One of my more significant complaints of Attack the Light was the wonky badge system. You pick up badges that can be equipped to characters and provide boosts. This could be anything from increased XP or a greater chance to score critical hits. For some reason, these badges would just unequip and become randomly unavailable in Attack the Light, but here they just work, and as a result, I had a lot of fun customizing my loadouts. A deeper and much more extensive upgrading system is here to give you true reward for leveling up. You have complete control over which stats are upgraded, so you can tweak every character to your liking. Honestly, this battle system is better in every way than its predecessor, and that's saying something because I thoroughly enjoyed what was on display in Attack the Light. You're probably curious about how the game handles having a rotating cast of characters. Personally, I'm a little mixed on this. Party members definitely fall behind when left out of your team, but it also kind of felt like they were being leveled in the background. At the very least, they were passively acquiring skill points. At one point I added a character to my team who hadn't been used for a while, and they had a plethora of points to spend. I think the big issue is that there really isn't any incentive to switch things up. Once you find your perfect combo, that's it. You never encounter enemies that require a certain set of skills, nor do you really encounter any environmental obstacles that require specific characters. Well, actually, you're basically required to keep Peridot in your party from the moment you get her, which is kinda weird. No other character is relied upon this heavily. Somebody at Grumpy Face must be a big fan. The members I settled on to line up next to Steven were Garnet, Pearl, and Peridot. I used Garnet as my go-to general attacker, while Pearl was handy because her spear is powerful and can hit so many enemies if they're lined up. Also, Pearl confused with Garnet to create Sardonyx, and good lord is Sardonyx overpowered. Finally, Peridot is able to create so many useful gadgets. I'd start every battle by crafting an auto-firing cannon to do passive damage, and she can also create landmines and defense-lowering machines. Possibly the biggest issue with the battle system is that it's just too easy. Or perhaps it's all based on the way I played. My tactic for this game was to spend the entire world maxing out the relationships, refusing to use these abilities on grunt enemies. This meant that every boss I came to would face the wrath of a bunch of superpowered attacks. Even with all those powerful attacks at my disposal, I rarely used any of them other than Sardonyx, save for the final boss battle where I was forced to get a little more creative. Almost every boss fight consisted of fusing into Sardonyx, wailing on the boss for a couple of minutes, and then reaping the rewards. Things do become a little more difficult towards the end, and as I said, the final boss battle forces you to expand your horizons, but it's something that is sorely lacking from like 90% of the game. Narrative is a pretty significant part of Steven Universe, and that's carried over to this game. Firstly, Save the Light is a genuine sequel to Attack the Light. The game literally kicks off with a recap of events to catch you up to speed. This game sees a mysterious homeworld gem, Hessonite, trying to reacquire the prism that you encountered throughout the first game. What follows is a pretty stock standard Steven Universe story, however it reveals some cool lore and backstory details and is 100% canon to the show. While it's nothing special and follows every Steven Universe trope to the letter, what I loved is just how important the story feels to the overall narrative of the world. Save the Light genuinely feels like part of the show's history, rather than some tacked on side story that can be ignored. And this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise, considering Rebecca Sugar wrote this game and was extremely involved with development. For those of you who don't know, Rebecca Sugar is the show's creator. I spoke to Chris Graham, who is the founder and director of Grumpy Face, about the collaboration with Rebecca Sugar, and his responses were very illuminating. It's clear that Rebecca Sugar wanted this game to matter. She was extremely involved, gave them freedom to create brand new characters, and also extremely protective, making sure nothing clashed with pre-existing or planned canon. This is the kind of care and love I want to be put into every Cartoon Network game. Visually, the game retains the same style as its predecessor, but everything seems more polished and detailed, alongside the fact that environments are much more fleshed out. The sound side of things is also great. The musical score is brilliant yet again, I'd have to double check whether the same composers from the show worked on this, but the music captures the exact same feel and tone of the show.
Cybernetic Brandon from the future here with an update. While the music in Steven Universe is composed by Ivy and Shirashu, Save the Light soundtrack is composed by Dustin Buzovich. This is a truly impressive job, as the music wouldn't feel out of place in a regular episode.
It's such a relaxing OST that it turned mundane moments spent running around into pure bliss. What was really surprising is that there's quite a bit of voice acting here. Not only do you get random sound bites being spouted during gameplay, but cutscenes are fully voiced. This again links into the story because having the emotion of actual voices delivering lines takes things up a notch.
The day we evacuated this planet, I had to get my troops out so quickly, so fast. There was no way to go back for it, no time. Why did we have to leave so quickly if the crystal gems were just going to survive? Why did I have to leave my prism only for someone like you to steal it?
So we are a long way into this review and I've barely mentioned a single negative. I can genuinely say I was like halfway into the game and I didn't have a single negative thing to say. At one point I was thinking that this could possibly be a 10 out of 10 game for me. But there are some negatives that rear their head and stop the game from reaching unfathomable heights for a Cartoon Network game. Most of my negatives come back to Grumpy Face's choice to stray from the standard battling gameplay. This starts in the Strawberry Battlefield level, which is far too focused on moving around metal blocks with Peridot. It's clunky and something that persists throughout the rest of the game. This is then combined with a later level that is far too focused on puzzle platforming. There's a good hour or two where the game straight up becomes a puzzle platformer. These elements are fun in moderation. As the main attraction, they're a nuisance. The puzzles and the platforming are not where the game shines, so when focus is shifted from the awesome battles, it becomes frustrating. This section had a big effect on how much I enjoyed Save the Light. Why couldn't this just stick to being mostly focused on RPG battling? I also had some frustrations with the static camera angles. A player-controlled camera wouldn't go astray here. And now I've finally come to the big elephant in the room, the performance issues. These are the entire reason the game was slammed at release. By all reports, Save the Light was a mess. You can find massive threads on Reddit that detail basically every issue and bug present at launch. But in my playthrough, I can honestly say I didn't encounter anything too major. There certainly are remnants of it though. Playing the game, you can just tell that it was janky in a previous build, and Grumpy Face have had to paper over the cracks. At times, it feels like the engine is being held together via sticky tape, glue, and lots of positive thoughts. Load times between areas are also quite long for a PS4 game of this scope. As I said though, I didn't encounter anything too bad. After playing Steven Universe Save the Light, I think it's the poster child for how we need to reassess the way we critically analyse video games in this day and age. By all reports, Steven Universe was broken upon release and deserved low scores. But it's 2020. Developers have the ability to push out massive patches and game-altering updates. After doing this, there is no way that Save the Light deserves anything lower than an 8 out of 10. It's a genuinely great game that was a bit of a mess under the hood at release. Unfortunately, despite all of the fixes, Steven Universe Save the Light will forever be remembered as a 5 out of 10 game. Its reviews are frozen in time, which is pretty archaic now that video games are so fluid. If the performance issues scared you away at launch, now is the time to pick up Steven Universe Save the Light. I promise you won't regret it. Even the harshest reviews at the time agree. I read pretty much every PS4 review, and basically the only major negative any of them had was the performance. Clocking in at around 9 to 10 hours, Save the Light is the longest game we've reviewed in Cartoon Network video game history. It's also the best game we've reviewed in Cartoon Network history. Man, I just love these Steven Universe RPGs. The best way to describe them is cozy. The overall feel and aesthetic just makes me feel warm and fuzzy while playing. These are feel-good games that I can see myself returning to as a pick-me-up. Next time I'll be reviewing OKKO Let's Play Heroes, the first and last OKKO game. This show is literally made for a video game adaptation, so it'll be super interesting to see what they produce. I'm hoping that Cartoon Network games have finally turned a corner here and we'll start to see some real bangers from them. To make sure you don't miss that episode, hit the subscribe button.